Hello, everybody. Tommy Tables here, and we are back. I missed the place. I don't know. There's a little bit of dust. We left it in a bit of a mess, but joining me here, back once more in our snug den, is Lou Wasserman's ghost and Lorn. How are you, gentlemen, tonight?
Pretty good. We need a maid. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think we do. I'm gonna have to start looking for one.
I remember at Disney World at the late lamented Explorers Club, there was a girl with a very, very thick, and I could never tell if it was real or put on, Southern accent who played the part of the French maid. And she came out and she said, "Hi, y'all. My name's Danelle. I'm the French maid." And then she looked at everybody and said, "Yeah, I'm from the south of France." So I always loved that line. Anyway.
That's probably the most lighthearted we're going to be today because the movie that we are reviewing is a doozy. And I mean that in the sense that you will leave this film feeling like you're trapped in a cave-in. And that's exactly what happens in this film. Ace in the hole. And it's not Mr. Kirk Douglas right there on the screen. It's not him who's trapped in the cave-in, but another unfortunate fella that Mr. Douglas runs across. Lou, do you want to give us a little synopsis?
Well, basically, Kirk Douglas is a guy who is a journalist who has been fired by several big city newspapers for various infractions and winds up at a dead end in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And there's a guy named Leo Minoso who is digging in a cave in an abandoned silver mine thinking he's going to get rich, and it collapses on him. And Kirk realizes, if I could build this into a big story, this is my ticket back to the big time. And before you know it, he has gotten hundreds of people coming to see what's going to happen and is intentionally making the people who could rescue this guy relatively easily take the long way around, basically, just to summarize. And at some point, when he realizes what he's done, he says, well, let's go the easy way. No, we can't do that anymore. It's collapsed too far. And the guy's very cynical wife is involved, and the local sheriff is involved, and everybody is corrupt as heck. And this was Billy Wilder's attempt to make a comment on the cynical nature of the media, certainly a subject that is very valid today. And it's about that and then some. And Kirk Douglas is nasty and wonderful and realizes the price of his attitude a little too late. And it's a powerful thing. Now, there were apparently a couple of real life trapped miner stories that led up to this. I believe in both cases the people didn't make it. And Wilder took that as an inspiration and did his thing. Now, you have to remember that Billy Wilder was a director of great note who had made some pretty big pictures and had very good success. You may know him from his funnier ones later, most notably Some Like It Hot, I would say, and The Apartment. But, he made Sunset Boulevard, and he made Witness for the Prosecution, and a lot of pretty rough-edged things. Now, Billy Wilder's a guy who was from Germany, and when Hitler came in 1933, he realized, I better get out of here. He had been a screenwriter there, and he went to Paris first and eventually wound up in America. And supposedly, he tried several times to get into the country by way of Mexico and was rejected by immigration authorities until finally, I think it was the sixth or seventh one that he approached, said, "What is it you do?" And he said, "I make movies." And the guy looked at him, stamped his papers and said, "Okay, just make good ones." And he did. But he had done these sort of hard-edged movies before. He did The Lost Weekend, which was all about alcoholism with Ray Milland, Double Indemnity, Five Graves to Cairo. But Ninotchka, which was probably his biggest hit before this in 1939, really, wrote the screenplay, was a comedy. And he made a lot of comedies. And people were kind of surprised to find out that he had this much of an edge to him. And certainly this movie did not do as well as it would have, partly because people were disappointed. They thought it was going to be something fun from the guy who made so much fun.
Well, it had a budget of 1.8 million and it had a box office of 1.3. But this also came out in 1951. So it's a pretty old one. This is the first one we've reviewed that's in black and white.
Well, what's really interesting is that the next picture he made was Stalag 17, and it was a huge hit, and he was supposed to get a percentage. And the studio came back and said, we're taking back what we lost on your previous one before we give you your percentage.
Oh,
he was not happy.
I can imagine that. Well, this movie, I gotta say, it. So, number one, thank you to Mr. Martin Stone. I believe he was the one who recommended this.
Yes.
And I say thank you in quotation marks because this was a bit of a punch in the face. Like, I mean, it's a good movie right off the bat. I would say it's a fantastic film. As Lou had said, it grips you from the beginning, and it doesn't let you go until the end. But you have to be in a certain frame of mind to watch this, I think. And I don't know, Lorn, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, when I got done watching the movie, I had sent a message to all of us on our back channel chat. And I think what I said was something to the effect of, I don't think I have ever felt so sick/dirty after watching a movie before. And I think my comments on it would be similar to yours in that it's a great movie. It's well acted. The very first thought that I had after feeling sick and dirty was that the more things change, the more they stay the same. This very much illustrates media today. And in fact, the nearest example that I can think of from when I was younger was when they had baby Jessica down the well. I don't know if anybody will remember that story, but it was the same kind of thing. The hard thing about a movie like this is usually I watch movies to be entertained. This is a movie that shows you the dark, seamy underbelly of how the media works. And you can see the truth in it because we see it all the time today. There's nothing that happens in this movie that wouldn't happen today, only more so. And I think that's part of where that feeling of sickness and dirtiness comes from, because you realize we consume this all the time, and people really are that cynical.
And what's really interesting is a lot of the criticisms of this movie, some people just hated it, were basically moral outrage. How dare you suggest that the great institution of the American free press is corrupt? And how dare you make a sheriff who's corrupt? And how dare you suggest that some people are venal and cynical and nasty this way? You're downright un-American. Now, what it reminded me of is, I think his name is Roy Higgins, the man who invented The Fugitive TV series, said that when he tried to sell it to the networks, he got lots and lots of rejection on the ground of, how dare you say a good American court would ever find an innocent man guilty? We aren't that either naive or self-righteous. I don't know which it is, maybe a mix of both anymore, which is good for us as far as seeing the real world, but bad that we are indeed so, in many ways, corrupt society.
Well, there is an interesting juxtaposition in the movie in that all of the big-time media types are shown to be of a similar stripe as the Kirk Douglas character.
Tatum.
But yeah, Charlie Tatum. But the editor, Mr. Boot of the Albuquerque paper, the small-time paper that he goes and tries to get a new job at, where he's looking for this big story to get out of this sand pit, he prides himself on telling the truth. It's plastered all over his office. And that's part of the reason why he's a small-time paper. You know, he's not doing the sensational stories. He's just reporting what little news there is in the area straight. And that's what creates the opening for this slimy character that Douglas plays.
Because he takes a chance on him and hires him for, what was it, I believe $60. And basically, and that's what sort of you're seeing right there at the beginning of the movie. Douglas comes barging into this Albuquerque newsroom saying, you know, this is a small town. This is a small joint. I'm a New York reporter. You can have me for, $60, blah, 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 blah. And like really making a big name, like a big scene and a big name for himself. And you can see that Mr. Boot, who you can see the back of his head there in the photo, isn't really buying it too much, but nonetheless, he does take him on. And you're right before we began speaking in the pre-show, you had made the point, Lorn, that there are only really three characters in this movie that are decent people, and Mr. Boot is one of them. But I found that I was kind of taken aback by the prescience of this film, and at the same time, I recognize the fact that when we're sort of going through these older films, it's very, very easy to wear rose tinted glasses. A lot of the time you're watching these things that are set in the 50s, the 40s, the 60s and the like. And the impulse is to feel that this was a better time, a simpler time, a time when the stuff that we see in the news today, and we see how the news today makes the news today, wasn't really happening. But this movie here is proof positive that even back then, people were noticing things, right? Like in the sense that they were starting to have doubts about their institutions. And it's a little unfortunate to think that it goes back that far.
I think a lot of that in the early 50s and the late 40s had to do with World War II.
Yeah.
You know, back in World War I, there was a popular song called "How You Gonna Keep Them Down on the Farm After They've Seen Paris," where people were joking but serious that they were worried that their nice young American boys who were so incorruptible and so honest and so simple would be in the evil flesh pots of Europe because they were over there as doughboys and come back changed. Well, World War I, although it was a horrible thing and so many people died and were wounded, was a walk in the park compared to World War II, especially what most people didn't know about but learned at the end about, well, the reasons why Billy Wilder escaped from Europe. So I think that everything we thought we knew about people, even people who were different than us as far as nationality or race or whatever, is wrong. I'm not describing this very. I know what kind of says it. I remember hearing an interview with Joseph Wambaugh, who wrote all those great classic cop books and that were made into movies and TV shows, and was a cop himself. And he said the average policeman never draws his gun in the entire course of his career, but he has a different problem. He spends all day with the worst people in the world.
Yeah.
And he starts to think everybody's like that, including his wife, his mother, his friends. There is a cynicism that can grow like a disease in you. And I think this movie is a cautionary tale about that as much as it is about anything else.
I think it's also important to remember that it didn't really start here either. If you want to talk about yellow journalism, you can go all the way back to the 1880s and, and eventually William Randolph Hearst and all of that stuff. So it's not a new tale, but I think part of the thing that was almost amusing to me in a darkly cynical kind of way is as the crowd keeps building up around this area, it becomes a festival, and you have
and we should explain, we're talking, they put up a Ferris wheel for God's sakes, and they have food stands, and people are coming on special trains, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people are visiting this totally remote spot in the middle of nowhere. And the movie, when it failed more or less the first time, was reissued under the name The Big Carnival.
Yeah, and the thing is that they're at this Navajo outpost that's basically selling Navajo woven rugs and little artifacts. It's a little tourist trap in the middle of nowhere, and they've set this great big carnival up there, and there's all these signs that say that all these profits are going to go for the rescue of Leo in this area. Everybody's having a great time, and they're consoling themselves, saying, "Well, we're putting money towards a cause." This is how they're convincing themselves that what they're doing is moral and righteous. And all I could think about as I was watching this is how many of these average, not GoFundMe, but like Give, Send, Go things and things that's a lot of, you see a lot of those kind of stories, not saying that they're all cynical ploys to get money from people, but there are some that will exploit those kind of causes. And that's kind of our modern equivalent. I don't know that we would necessarily go to a physical location and throw up a carnival now. There's all kinds of causes that just spring out of the ether.
By the way, in reality, when the film was finished, and this was one of the biggest physical sets built up to that point.
It was huge.
The studio actually charged people to go visit the set after it was over.
No
so
kidding.
They took part in the same thing. They actually were selling tickets. And by the way, I've been there. And so has anybody who has traveled Interstate 40, which follows the old route of Route 66 between the Petrified Forest and Gallup, because that's where this is.
Lou, I just got this flash in my head of a plane of dirt with a little sort of lump burrowing through it. Bugs Bunny popping up, being like, "Hey, this isn't the way to Albuquerque."
So this actually was shot on location in New Mexico then.
Yeah, it was literally, it's more or less just over the line into New Mexico, about, I would say, 50, 75 miles, if that, west of Gallup. And there are still many of these little trading posts dug into the side of the hill that you can stop at and buy really lousy crap at. But this one was built for the thing, including a fake Indian cliff dwelling as part of it. But there are real ones, and they're still there in 2024, for God's sakes.
Wow.
By the way, that's a great drive if you want to take I-40 all the way across country. But it's the middle of nowhere and then some.
Yeah, so I mean, just to explain it for the people who haven't seen it, Kirk Douglas is sort of going off to, I think it's a snake hunt or some such.
Rattlesnake roundup, yeah.
A rattlesnake
that was
roundup.
the big story he was sent to cover.
That was a big story he was sent to cover, and so he was on his way there, and they stop in at this trading post / gas station, and he notices that no one was there. He sees that there's this sort of old lady praying inside the trading post, even and not answering him, like she's distraught and beside herself. And he sees a cop drive by, and so they follow. You know, his reporter's instincts are sort of picked up, and that's when they discover that this guy Leo is basically trapped in. There's been a cave in, and it's the setting, the framing, the videography, like you said, it's this big barren empty space, and over the course of the film it gradually starts filling up. It's not like they called a carnival right away, right? Like you started having more and more people showing up, and it becoming almost like a festival in a way.
And lots of people, obviously entrepreneurs, are saying, well, if there's people there, they're going to want a cold drink, they're going to want a hot dog, they're going to want to ride a ride, and one thing leads to another.
Yeah.
There's two other things that I think are important here too. And one is that the movie is a little ham-fisted in the sense that Leo in this allegory is representing the truth. He's the guy that's trapped down underground. He's this poor sap that is trying to support this wife that has expensive tastes, let's say, and doesn't want to be stuck in this dust ball, very similar to Kirk Douglas.
She's already got her foot out the door the entire film. Like she just does
Played
not.
by Jan Sterling, by the way.
Yeah, and
he's there on the left.
He's been going deeper and deeper into this Navajo cliff dwelling, looking for artifacts that he can peddle at this trading post. And he's this poor sap that's head over heels in love with this woman who really just wants to get away from him. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting about this is that when you have all of these people that are turning up for this thing, you have people that are like peddling music. They come up with their own anthem for rescuing Leo. They're selling the sheet music. You've got, like you said, soda pop and sandwiches and all of this stuff. It doesn't start off that way. Initially, it's a few curious people that just show up and kind of hear about it. But part of the way that they sensationalize this thing is that this cliff dwelling, it's called the Seven Vultures. And so they sell this story as though, well, what's happened is that you have these ancient Navajo dead who are now basically cursing Leo at the bottom of this thing for removing these treasures from the cave.
It's kind of an American Southwestern take on the King Tut story.
Exactly.
Howard Carter.
You're right. And he almost kind of leads Leo into saying those words. You know, he's drawing it out of him so that he can put it as this direct quote from the guy who's trapped at the bottom of the well. And it makes it into this big sensational story. And everybody wants to know, well, what's the result of this curse going to be? So again, it's adding flair to the story to sensationalize it.
And Billy Wilder, as a writer, and he co-wrote this with one of his writing partners, but he has such a wonderful sense of the right words to show somebody's character. They're going to have a church service to pray for Leo, and Kirk Douglas is telling the wife, you've got to be there. And she doesn't want to go, and she says, I don't usually get on my knees and pray. It bags my nylons. And if that doesn't tell you everything about her...
But you know, yeah. So the wife is pretty much an irredeemable character from the get-go. But what I found really compelling about this film too, and again, this was something that you don't really see much in movies in this day and age. Kirk Douglas wasn't 100% slimeball. like he had appealing qualities to him, and he had the like every so often you'd see the human side of him come out. The best way that I can describe it is he was very nuanced, and he wasn't a black and white character, and it was really refreshing to see something like that on the screen. Of course, at the end of the film, his guilt kind of overtakes him, and I guess the moral of the story of the film may be, if you really want to shoot for the stars, you have to do it without any sense of moral code or the like. Maybe not the right message to take from the film, but I found his character to be compelling. He wasn't one note. He was fleshed out. He was very, like, probably one of the most human characters I've ever seen on the screen. I would say that.
It's interesting that although he made several movies in between and before, the movie that they refer to in the trailer, if you watch it, and you can go on IMDb and everywhere else to see the trailer for this film, they call him the Champion, because he made this movie Champion, this boxing movie, in 1949. And Roger Ebert said that he interviewed him in 1969 and was talking about the role of a champion. And Kirk Douglas said this, quote, "It doesn't matter if you're a nice guy or you're a bastard. What matters is you won't bend."
Mm.
And that's a lot of what's going on in this movie to me. He has this struggle between, he'd like to be more sympathetic. In a lesser movie, he would be more sympathetic for Leo, but he wants his moment of fame and his success. It's a wonderfully complex movie that pretends to be a very, very simple movie in a way.
In a way, a part of this movie sort of reminded me of Requiem for a Heavyweight. Do you get any vibes for that?
Well, in the sense that he's the guy who's sort of used to be big and isn't anymore, and is trying to get it back and somehow can't, and and is willing to be corrupted in order to get it back. That's certainly true. In fact, there's another great line in the movie where he says, "I can handle big news and little news, and if there's no news, I'll go out and bite a dog."
Yeah, that is a good line. Yeah, Tommy, I think you're a little more charitable towards the character than I would be. He does have a bout of conscience at the end, I think, just because he begins to see that. I think the whole time he thinks the whole thing's in his control, that he's going to be able to get this guy out. He's going to stretch it out as long as he can. He's going to make as much money as he can.
And he needs a happy ending to really make it work for him, too.
Yeah,
although he's always ready for it not to be. And he assumes he's going to have a happy ending to tell after he scares everybody to death and gives them that whole occult Indian curse thing.
But at the end of it, when he actually sees how sick Leo has become and realizes that he really is sick and he's only got hours left, that's when his conscience actually attacks. And I don't know that I completely buy the flip, but at the same time, I can see where this is a scheme that's gotten out of his control. You know, he knows he's a bad man, but he doesn't think of himself as an unintentional murderer. And I think that's kind of what drives him at the end.
He realizes he's gone across that line somehow and lost touch with the fact that he was doing it while he was doing it.
Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like, take a look at the photo I put up on the screen there. I found that it was in those interactions with Leo in the cave that Kirk was really able to sell the fact that, I mean, at least in my interpretation of it, it wasn't just all an act. Like, he was genuinely concerned for the guy. And I felt that was the case from day one. And it was one of those things where the concern was meshing with his career aspirations. And as long as those two were on the same track, he thought that he could, like you said, Lorn, get away with it. But when they started to diverge and he realized that he'd screwed up and that this guy's life was basically about to end thanks to that, of course, that's when his conscience kicked in. But sorry, Lorn.
I've got a totally different take on this than you, I think, in that I don't think he cared about Leo at all at the beginning. I think he saw him just as a means to an end, and he was always confident that he's going to get this guy out. He's just going to stretch it out as long as he can. I think what happened, in my mind, is that he grew to see just how venal this wife was and how much Leo actually loved her and stupidly loved her. And just he saw the goodness of Leo at the end there as he's dying, knowing what his wife is planning to do. And I think knowing that he is responsible for him dying in this way, and knowing that he has to keep this terrible secret about what his wife really is. I think that's what got to him, was the understanding that, man, this guy's too good for what the whole world has done to him. That poor guy was only digging in the cave because his wife had expensive tastes. It was her that put him there.
And when he thinks about it, I mean, we only have vague references to all these other reasons why he got fired from other newspapers. But you have to assume that in all of those cases, you know, the people he was dealing with, the people he was interviewing, the stories he was covering, it was all about him and not about them. They were a means to his end, which is to make himself famous, successful, whatever. And the fact that he got caught at it too many times and kicked out hasn't taught him anything except, I didn't do it cleverly enough. I better try harder next time.
Yeah, and that's something we didn't really go into when we were discussing the synopsis. When they bring in the engineers to try and figure out how to get this guy out, they could get him out in 16 hours. But that makes the story go away too quickly. And so they contrive instead to go through this complex mechanism of drilling in through the top that'll stretch the whole thing out to a week. And that's why, ultimately, Leo dies.
And it's funny because they get called out on it during the film by one of the passerbys who's being interviewed. And he's like, well, you know, I was in a cave-in when I was a minor, and we just went in and shored up the floorboards, and away we went. And it's like, no, this is a completely different case here. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know, though. I still felt that Kirk Douglas's character, maybe I'm reading too much into it, I felt that he still had a nuance to him, that he did still have redeemable qualities even while he was trying to get this story done.
Well, the question is that in the script or is that in Kirk Douglas's performance?
Well,
because as much as he wants to be hard and really commit to the character, he doesn't want the audience to hate him.
It's true.
You know,
he's very roguish.
I mean, there's stories. I know William Goldman's book about writing Adventures in the Screen Trade talked about scripts that he offered to stars who said, no, this isn't me because I'm not the guy stuff happens to. I'm the guy who makes it happen. You know, I mean, he wasn't a big star then like he became later, but they're always looking ahead.
Mm-hmm.
As much as they're committing to this performance and this story and this show, and I think he's great in it. He got a lot of criticism for being hammy in this thing. I don't think he was hammy at all. He was Kirk Douglas saying, you don't break. Because look, if he isn't totally committed to this slimy scheme, then his attempt at redemption, too little too late, but his attempt at it means nothing. It becomes fake. You don't buy that he's really changed unless you really see what he was before he changed, you know?
Well, I still think you guys are being a little easy on him just because
Lord,
in his mind, he thinks he's got control of this whole situation from end to end. And I think part of the reason that I'm not willing to be so easy on him is that he gets angry with Lorraine because she won't wear the furs that he got her for this anniversary.
Leo water.
Yeah, and he starts choking her, and in desperation, she stabs him, and that's a mortal wound. And it's easy to have a deathbed conversion when you know your own life is coming to an end. Suddenly your perspective shifts. And so at that point, he was already starting to move because Leo had finally gotten to him. I think he realized just how bad a straits things were for Leo and that he was responsible for it. But I still don't think this guy is a good guy. I don't think he's got a.
Oh, no, he's not a good guy, but he is a guy. If the whole world is corrupt, his corruption doesn't matter. And he is surrounded by people like the newspaper editor who aren't like him. Even those people who came out to see the carnival are not there because they're like him. They're there because they're just the audience, you know? And in a way, they're the audience watching the movie too, because if it's such a terrible thing going on, why are we taking such pleasure in enjoying it and eating our popcorn?
Well, that's where the whole justification goes to. All of these profits are going to the friends of Leo, you know?
Yeah, right.
You sort of salve your conscience a little bit when you feel like you're working towards a cause.
And another thing we should talk about is the look uh, Charles Lang, who was the cinematographer on this thing, I mean, this guy started back in the 30s, I think, or even no, 1926. He did his first movie, and he did a lot of big pictures. He was Paramount's #1 guy in those days. And the great line also in Ebert's review, see about this. He says, "The black and white cinematography by Charles Lang is the inevitable choice. This story would curdle color."
Mm.
I think that's true. Well, I mean, it is a black and white allegorical kind of story. So, yeah.
And I mean, he talks more about it. There's not a wasted shot, and it's single-mindedly economical. Students of Arthur Schmidt's editing could learn from the way every shot does its duty. There's not even a gratuitous reaction shot. And notice how no time is wasted with needless exposition. A wire service ticker turns up there and again without comment. The press tent goes up and speaks for itself.
Yep.
It's a lean, mean movie that doesn't waste a moment or a shot it doesn't even, like he says, it doesn't try and do much exposition. We know he was fired, but we don't know the specifics, and they don't matter. We don't want to hear all the stories about once upon a time I was doing this story in Chicago and blah. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
The point is he's fired. Yeah.
As an example of that, the opening shot of the movie is him being towed into town with his car broken down.
Yes.
And you already know that he's in desperate need of a job to get himself going again. And I sort of thought that was going to become a plot point. But after he gets the job, we immediately jump to 1 year later, where he's frustrated because he still hasn't managed to get out of this town because
he's still being sent out to cover the rattlesnake roundup.
Yeah.
Yep. Not exactly the big story for New York or his past.
This film, so the film clocks in at 1 hour and 55 minutes. So it's not a long one. It's, as you guys said, it's very, very tight. It starts off, it says it says its piece, and then it ends. I don't know if it's an abrupt ending, but it's certainly, when it ends, it ends. And you'll understand why I'm saying that when you see the film, if you do see the film. I did feel that at the beginning of the movie, Kirk Douglas was being a little bit hammy in the newsroom when he was, basically trying to get a job. Although you can write that off as being him.
Well, see, I think that's intentional on his and Wilder's part, because they're starting it off so the audience is feeling very comfy that this is like the front page or all of the countless big city newsroom movies that they've seen in the past. And it isn't that movie at all. And they're setting us up to be hit by the reality of what's really going on.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just a side note, but it's like as the crowds are growing and as more media is showing up to cover this story, there's a moment where they're doing radio interviews with guys in the crowd. And one of the very first people that showed up, his whole family is there. He starts hucking insurance on the air, because it's that kind of a thing where everybody is exploiting the situation for profit or trying to.
Yes, and if there's an audience, we'll give them something to do, whether it's eating cotton candy or buy insurance or whatever. I'd like to read another little bit from this really wonderful review that Roger Ebert wrote. He says, Wilder, born in Austria, a refugee from Hitler, certainly became one of America's greatest directors, but he never bought into the American dream. What he saw in Europe warned him off of dreams. Although Ace in the Hole has always been considered one of his greatest films, its rejection by the marketplace isn't surprising. Moviegoers like crime, like suspense, like violence, but they like happy endings, and Wilder is telling them to wake up and smell the coffee.
That's true. I mean,
isn't that profound?
Very much so, especially given the fact that you almost had this meta moment where Kirk Douglas's character is saying, we need a happy ending for this movie, for this accident. We need to get him out. And obviously, Leo dies and they aren't able to produce that. And then the movie likewise has a very unhappy ending.
Billy Wilder was really a unique talent and a unique person. I'm reading some of his quotes about various things. And for example, after he directed Marilyn Monroe for the second time in Some Like It Hot, he said, quote, I have discussed this with my doctor and my psychiatrist, and they tell me I'm too old and too rich to go through that again. He says, some pictures play wonderfully to a room of 8 people. I don't go for that. I go for the masses. I go for the end effect. And, well, I read this one to you before we started tonight. He says, a bad play folds and is forgotten. But in pictures, we can't bury our dead. When you think it's out of your system, your daughter sees it on television and says, my father's an idiot. Oh, I like this one. Apparently, when he was in Vienna, he actually visited Sigmund Freud's office or whatever. And he said he saw his couch and he said, quote, it was a very tiny little thing. All his theories were based on the analysis of very short people. Then in 1976, quote, they say Wilder is out of touch with his times. Frankly, I regard it as a compliment. Who the hell wants to be in touch with these times?
Well, it's that sounds like a number of really good quotes. One thing I want to point out here up on the screen is that you see the sign, and it's basically saying this in the background of the sign. There, you see the older ruins, and that's where Leo's trapped. And notice on the sign it says free to come in. Over the course of the film, that free gets sort of painted over with 25 cents, then 50 cents, then $1. And it's all the wife's doing as well. Like, she is perfectly happy to exploit this as much as possible. She's the one who's called in a lot of these, how should I put it? Well, she's the one who's called the circus in some ways.
And remember, at this point in time, that road going by is Route 66, which is a 2-lane blacktop, not Interstate 40 with 8 lanes of traffic each way. So people were crossing the country on, getting their kicks on Route 66, and getting them to stop at your place, not at the one before and not at the one down the road, was all about staying alive out there.
Yeah. So it just, as the price goes up to visit these old ruins, you do feel that the moral turpitude of everybody keeps sort of getting worse and worse. It's a really interesting visual metaphor. I found a really neat little detail.
And by the way, obviously, from the size of the crowd that grows, I don't know if you have one of those pictures of the whole massive.
Yeah, let me see if I can find one.
Obviously, nobody said, no, that's too expensive. That's a ripoff. I'm not shopping. Everybody was willing to buy into it, even at $1 a head or whatever it was. And everybody was also going to get a soda and a cotton candy and ride the Ferris wheel. There you go. So how this thing grows and grows and grows in no time, because we know it's only a matter of several days in the course of this story, because we know that that's about how long he lives. Chicken, fry, hamburgers. I wonder if they meant fry bread, because that's a thing out there.
Fried bread. Oh,
yeah, that's a Navajo thing. But
this was before the invention of deep fried butter, I suppose.
Or Twinkies or whatever. Yeah, I suppose so. But
well, gentlemen, so Lou, I'm going to ask you first. What was your highlight of this film, and what was your low light of the film?
I think, to me, it's about watching Kirk Douglas basically commit to being this guy, and knowing that a lot of other people who might have taken the role for the sake of the role would have tried to find some sort of redeeming social value to a level at which it would have diffused the edge. This is watching an actor who, what he said in that quote I had about you don't bend. He doesn't take any easy shortcuts, and he doesn't take any soft moments that really are real. And even when he realizes, like Lorn said, basically, I've become a murderer, we can see him kind of saying, well, that's a damn shame, and I better go on from here. Not many people would commit to do that. Not many movie stars would. That's pretty brilliant. As far as weaknesses, maybe audiences would have believed this then, but to me, the idea that there's this many people out there desperate for a sensation to show up. I understand why they did it this way, because they're making this point. And like I say, it was renamed the Big Carnival, and that's exactly what it is. But I think this probably exceeds the population of Gallup, New Mexico at that time, by the time they get all those people out there. And it's like, where the hell did they all come from? And I know there's that shot, maybe you've got that somewhere too, of this train pulling up on the siding and disgorging all these people. But that part to me seems like it's part of an exaggeration for effect and not very realistic. And it takes a little bit of the realism edge off of this thing.
Yeah. Lauren, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to have a hard time pointing out a highlight because, as I said, I can respect all the performances in the world, but this is a movie that left me feeling sick. And so I think the low light for me that I'll point out is the moment when I knew in my stomach that I felt sick. And it was as the crowd grew, and there's a shot where you start coming in and you hear this ballad that's been written about Leo that they're singing, and you start hearing this music over and over throughout the rest of the picture, and they're selling the sheet music at 25 cents a sheet. It kind of sickened me because it's like I've seen that happen in news stories in the past. You know, some big event happens, and now there's an anthem that's written about it. It's usually in the context of war, but it's something that just gives you the sinking feeling because, you know, as an actual audience to real events, we've all been prey to this, getting caught up in some story that becomes a national sensation, and you're indirectly responsible for it. And feeling that in the pit of your stomach, I think, was the intent of the movie, but it does leave you feeling sick.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's you look at this and you think, is this something that could happen today? And the answer you come back with is maybe you wouldn't get such a huge crowd with it. Maybe you would, but the cynicism, the ugly reflection of humanity that it shows. I was watching this, and during one of the final scenes when you have so many people all around you, you can't help but think there's this one guy who's trapped inside the cave. They can still talk to him. They can, reach out to him with sticks and whatnot. And you've got these just hundreds and hundreds of people on the outside milling about, doing things, like just being utterly and completely useless while still feeling self-important. And my God, like I have to say it again, like this is such a prescient film, I felt. So in terms of like highlights for me, I would say I agree. Kirk Douglas's character, his performance was fantastic. It was really, really neat to see him on the screen and to play and to see where Michael Douglas comes from. Is, a lot of the mannerisms and whatnot are the same. And I still thought that his character was very compelling, flaws and all. Low light, it's hard for me to say. Like, I mean, Lauren, I think you covered it really well. You leave this movie feeling as if, feeling a lot less happy about your fellow person and humanity in general. And it's a little kind of distressing to think that, is this really what life is like? Yeah,
it's a movie that has come under new scrutiny recently, partly because of releases of the home video version and stuff like that. And here is from a recent review of it in the Village Voice, a guy named Nathan Lee said just what you just said, because here's how he said it. Here it is, half a century out of the past, a movie so acidly au courant, it stings.
Yeah.
Is that a great line?
Oh. That is beautiful. That's it. That's exactly what I was trying to go for, and obviously wasn't able to communicate. But yes, absolutely.
It's so au courant, it stings, even 50 years on, or however many it's been, really. Well, yeah. 70 now.
Jeez.
But
and that's where it's like I said, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And that was kind of, in a way, the scary punchline to the thing, is that, my God, we have not evolved at all. It's
worse.
Yeah.
If anything, this was an oddity then. It's a commonplace reality now. Yeah. And it makes you the value, aside from entertainment, and I don't want anybody to think, oh God, I shouldn't watch this because it's so negative or whatever. It is well worth seeing. But beyond that, you look at this and you see how this worked, and you think about all the things that are similar nowadays, and you think, how many of the stories that I'm being pushed in my daily multimedia multitude of madness, multiverse of stuff are really this fake and really this cynical and really have this little value in real terms. It's kind of a wake-up call, this movie, however many years in the past. And it's only gotten worse, not better. There's no doubt about that.
And it's a wake up call precisely because of the fact that it's so old and yet it is still so relevant to today. They use the term phony news in this film quite often. And that's just a hop, skip, and a jumping away from fake news, right?
Well, yeah, there you go. Fake news. Exactly.
The modern day equivalent of all of this story is clickbait. It's like that's exactly the tactic that's used. And so it's exponentially worse because there's so many more sources now.
Yeah. Whew. That was a heavy one, hey guys.
I'll tell you what, although next time for something completely different, we're not going to tell you what it is, but we are going to tell you it is a movie that we don't understand why it is not numbered among the very best from its source, because we think it's better than it's given credit for. I think that was our consensus talking about it.
That was it, yes.
And I will just say this, next week, everybody, we're going to go the distance.
Okay, nice.
How's that for a hint?
I see what you did there. All right.
And the funny thing is, the week after that, we're going to go too far.
That is.
And the week after that, we're going to get green. And after all this positivity, the week after that, we're going to say no. Oh, I tell you, folks, you ain't seen nothing yet, as Al Jolson said in the first Sound movie, The Jazz Singer. You ain't heard nothing yet.
Well, I like it. We're going out with a bang. Audience members, welcome back to the Pro Channel, by the way, if I didn't say that before. Let us know your thoughts. Did you watch the film? Have you seen the film? Have you heard of the film? Are you going to watch the film? If you do, let us know what you thought about it. We'd love to hear your comments. We read them. We engage with them at times. And we're hoping that you guys enjoy the products that we're doing. And the feedback that we get is crucial because we can't actually see how many people are watching these videos. So
yeah, for some reason, the members only stuff, we don't get the numbers the way that we do on the regular channel stuff.
So please leave likes if you like it. Please leave comments. It's even better. We feed off of that stuff. And
give us more suggestions because bless my soul, we're on a roll and we're not going to stop. There's another little hint to next week.
Well, thank you guys once again for a wonderful discussion. It was always a pleasure to be able to talk with you about these fantastic films and to, this was my first time seeing it. And so it's nice to be able to bounce it off of you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, evening. I think we need an exit line for this, for our group.
Yeah, we'll have to come up with one because I'm exhausted today. I can't think of anything terribly witty to button this with. Anybody else?
Suggestions in the comments.
Yes. Yes. Exit through the gift shop.
There you go. Exit through the gift shop. Yeah, exactly. I like that.
The gift to us from you is some comments and some suggestions.
Beautiful. And on that note, we will bid you all an adieu. And until next time, have a good one.
We hope you enjoyed that special presentation of The Genre Guys here on 23PO. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more content like it. And if you want to enjoy every episode of The Genre Guys as soon as they are released, be sure to become a member at WW Pro's YouTube channel. What were your thoughts on this amazing film? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. T3PO. Please comment, like, and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to That Park Place Podcasts Online, your source for exclusive content and highlights from WDW Pro, The Pro Show, and That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.